All right, let's dive into some pretty complex stuff, huh? We'll go deep on Deleuze, virtuality, and even this wild concept of becoming zero. All this stemmed from your interest in, well, absolute transformation. And wow, you've given us a lot to work through. Excerpts from A Thousand Plateaus, Anti-Oedipus, Deleuze on Bergson, even some Nick Land. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating mix of material, and it really shows a real desire to grapple with some of the most challenging and rewarding ideas out there.
So I guess the big question is, where do we even begin with something like Becoming Zero? It sounds like, I don't know, something straight out of science fiction.
Right. Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back. Got to look at Deleuze's philosophical foundations, right? Specifically how he interpreted Spinoza and Leibniz. They had some pretty different views on, well, the nature of reality. And Deleuze kind of brings these contrasting views together in a really interesting way.
Okay, so Spinoza and Leibniz, two pretty big names in philosophy. What were their main disagreements?
So imagine a universe where everything's connected. Everything flows from a single source. That's Spinoza's view. One substance called God or nature, and everything that exists. Just a modification of that one substance.
So like a giant cosmic ocean, and we're all just waves in this ocean.
Exactly. But Leibniz, he had a totally different vision. He saw the universe as being made up of countless individual units called monads, each one unique and self-contained.
So more like a universe of bubbles.
Yes.
Each one reflecting the whole, but each with its own, perspective.
Yeah, exactly. One giant ocean versus a universe of bubbles.
Pretty different ways of seeing things, huh?
So how did Deleuze reconcile these seemingly opposite ideas?
Yeah, I do.
That's what's so cool. Deleuze saw value in both, actually. He liked Spinoza's idea of immanence, this interconnectedness of everything, but he also was really drawn to Leibniz's emphasis on individual expression.
So he kind of wanted to have his philosophical cake and eat it too.
Huh. Yeah, you could say that. Deleuze actually wrote in one of his letters, "What I needed was both the expressive character of particular individuals and an immanence of being." Leibniz, in a way, goes still further than Spinoza on the first point. He was searching for a way to create a new concept of the virtual, one that could accommodate both of these, well, seemingly contradictory ideas.
And that's where ideas like the fold, the body without organs, the BWO, and the virtual itself come into play.
Exactly. These are key components of his whole philosophical framework. Let's start with the fold. Imagine folding a piece of paper. You're creating new relationships between the points on the paper, bringing what were distant points closer together. Deleuze saw the virtual as operating in a similar way, constantly folding and unfolding to create the actual world that we experience.
So the virtual is like this invisible blueprint constantly shaping reality. But how does this connect to the body without organs, the BW? It sounds kind of terrifying, if I'm being honest.
Don't worry, it's not as scary as it sounds. The BWO isn't a literal body without organs. It's more like a state of pure potentiality, a formlessness that precedes any fixed form, any fixed organization. Think of it like a blank canvas. It holds the potential for, well, any painting, any image, but it's not yet defined by any specific form. That's the BWO, pure potentiality, waiting to be actualized.
Okay, yeah, that makes a bit more sense. So if the virtual is this plane of potentiality and the BWO is like the unformed clay within that plane, how does the fold actually create the world we see?
Think of the fold as the process of actualization. The virtual is always folding, creating new connections, and these connections give rise to the actual. Like the virtual is constantly differentiating itself, and through this differentiation, the world comes into being.
And this is where we get to that fascinating idea from Lucretius, right? The Kleineman, the swerve.
Exactly. You picked up on a really crucial detail there. The Kleineman, or swerve, is this idea that atoms, as they move through space, randomly deviate from their straight paths.
So it's like a sudden, unpredictable change in direction. And Deleuze saw this as important for understanding how the virtual creates difference.
Absolutely. For Deleuze, difference isn't just about things being different from each other. Difference itself is it's a positive force, a creative force. It's the engine of change, the source of novelty and creativity. The swerve introduces this element of randomness, unpredictability, allowing for something new to emerge.
So instead of everything just following some, predetermined path, the swerve allows for these bursts of creativity and change, shaping the world in unpredictable ways.
Exactly. And those folds we were talking about, they aren't always smooth and predictable either. They can twist and turn, creating these unexpected detours and openings. And that's how the virtual constantly generates something new, new on the plane of immanence, that interconnected reality that Spinoza talked about.
Okay, so we've got the virtual constantly folding, differentiating itself, and creating the actual world through this interplay of difference and potentiality. But we still haven't really talked about becoming zero. Where does that fit into all this?
That's where things get really interesting, and that's where Nick Land comes in. To understand Becoming-0, we got to explore his concept of the zero glyph. It takes the idea of zero to a whole new level.
Hold on, zero glyph. We're not talking about just your average zero here.
Yeah, the zero glyph isn't just the numerical zero, the absence of quantity. It's a symbol of absolute emptiness, a gateway to what Land calls the outside. It represents the point where all categories, all structures, they collapse, where even the distinction between being and non-being dissolves.
The outside. That sounds, I don't know, pretty intense. Like we're entering some kind of a Lovecraftian dimension of pure cosmic horror.
It's definitely a concept that pushes the boundaries of thought. Land describes the zero glyph as an empty magnitude shift, a radical transformation that opens up access to this outside realm, a realm that exists beyond our established categories of time, space, even existence itself.
Okay, my mind is already starting to melt a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued. So how does this zero glyph actually work? How do you access this outside through it?
Land uses some pretty complex terminology here, terms like the pneumogram and hyperstition. But the basic idea is that the zero glyph functions like a key, unlocking this hidden dimension of reality. And this is where his concept of the virtual takes a really interesting twist. He sees cyberspace, this digital realm we're all inhabiting more and more, as an extension of the virtual itself. Yeah. But not just a digital space, a metaphysical realm, one that exists outside of time and space as we understand them.
So we're talking about a virtual realm that's not bound by the limitations of our physical world, a realm where the laws of physics, even time, might not apply.
Exactly. And this is where the idea of templexity comes in, this concept of time as a complex, multidimensional structure. Think of it like time becoming a landscape, a territory that can be explored and navigated, rather than a linear progression from past to future.
Okay, now this is getting pretty trippy.
Yeah.
So just to recap, we've got the zero glyph as this key to the outside, this a temporal virtual realm. We've got the BWO as this plane of pure potentiality that can be actualized through the fold. But how do we bridge the gap between Deleuze's ideas and Land's outside? How do we connect the dots between the fold and Becoming-0?
That's the million-dollar question. And that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. We'll need to go deeper into Land's unique take on the virtual, his concept of abstract negation, and how all of this ties back to your interest in this radical transformation called Becoming-0.
All right, I'm ready to go further down this rabbit hole. My brain might be a bit fried by the end, but I have a feeling it'll be worth it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Deleuze virtuality and Becoming-0. Last time we left off with this idea of the zero glyph as a key to Nick Land's outside, this vast atemporal virtual realm. It's a challenging concept, so kudos to you for sticking with us.
Yeah, my head was definitely spinning a little bit after part one, but in a good way. It's like we're exploring this whole new dimension of thought. So we were talking about the BWO as this plane of pure potentiality. How does Becoming-0 fit into that picture? Is it like a destination on this map of the virtual?
That's a really insightful quibble, and it gets to the core of what makes Becoming-0 so fascinating and difficult to grasp. If we think of the BWO as this field of pure potentiality, then Becoming-0 represents a movement towards the absolute limit of that potentiality. It's like pushing past the boundaries of form, identity, even existence as we understand it.
So it's not just about shedding old forms. It's about reaching a state where form itself becomes meaningless, like a total dissolution of all categories and structures.
Exactly. And this is where the connection to Deleuze's concept of the fold gets really interesting. Remember, the fold is about the virtual constantly differentiating itself, creating the actual world through these folds and connections. But Becoming-0 suggests a movement beyond even that process of differentiation. It's like a folding back on itself, a collapse into the 0 point of pure potentiality.
Okay, my brain is doing somersaults trying to visualize this. If the fold is about creating difference, Becoming-0 is about erasing difference, like reaching a state of absolute unity where everything collapses into this this undifferentiated zero.
That's a great way to think about it, but it's important to remember that the zero isn't simply nothingness. It's not an absence of being, but an overflowing of potentiality. Think of it like this in mathematics: dividing by zero is undefined. It breaks the rules. It opens up a space where the normal laws of arithmetic no longer apply.
So becoming zero is like dividing by zero in the realm of existence. It's about breaking the rules of reality itself.
Exactly. And this is where Land's concept of abstract negation comes in. He's not just talking about saying no to something. It's about severing all ties, all connections, all relationships. It's a radical break that opens up the possibility of something entirely new, something that can't be defined or categorized within our existing systems of thought.
It sounds like a kind of controlled demolition of reality, clearing the site so something totally new can be built.
That's a great analogy. Becoming zero isn't about destroying everything, but about creating a space where something truly new can emerge. And this is where it connects back to the outside we were talking about earlier. For Land, the outside is not just a realm of abstract concepts, but a territory that can be explored, a landscape that can be mapped.
Out on a territory. Are we talking about a literal place here, or is this some kind of metaphorical landscape?
Yeah, it's both, actually. Land draws on the idea of cyberspace as a kind of virtual realm, but he sees it as being much more than just a digital space. It's an extension of the virtual itself, a metaphysical realm that exists outside of time and space as we understand them.
So we're talking about a virtual realm that's not bound by the limitations of our physical world, a realm where time and space operate differently, maybe even where they don't exist at all.
Exactly, and this is where the idea of templexity comes in this concept of time as a complex, multidimensional structure. It's not just a straight line from past to future, but a tangled web of possibilities, a landscape that can be navigated and explored.
Okay, this is getting seriously mind-bending.
Yeah.
But I think I'm starting to see how Land is weaving together these different ideas. So the zero glyph is like a portal to this outside, this virtual realm where time and space operate differently. And the BWO is the vehicle, the map that allows us to navigate this uncharted territory.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, for Land, accessing the outside isn't just an intellectual exercise. He sees it as having real-world implications, the potential to radically transform our understanding of reality and even escape the limitations of our current existence.
This is all incredibly inspiring, but I have to admit I'm still struggling with the idea of becoming zero. On a personal level, what does it actually feel like to reach this state of absolute deterritorialization? Is it a blissful experience? Terrifying? Both?
That's the question that takes us to the edge of thought and maybe even beyond. To explore that further, we need to talk about how Deleuze and Land connect these ideas to the concept of desire.
Okay, desire. Now we're getting into some really interesting territory. Ready for part 3? Okay, we're back. Ready for the final part of our deep dive into Deleuze, virtuality, and becoming zero. Phew, we've been through a lot. Spinoza, Leibniz, the fold, the BWO, even Nick Land's pretty mind-blowing outside.
And now, as promised, we're going to tackle desire. It's a key concept for both Deleuze and Land, but they approach it in pretty different ways.
Yeah, you mentioned that desire isn't just about, lacking something. It's actually a creative force. That's pretty different from how we usually think about desire, right?
For sure. Both Deleuze and Land saw desire as this productive force, a kind of cosmic energy that drives the whole process of becoming. And that's where their ideas start to move away from traditional psychoanalysis, which, while often sees desire as rooted in lack or deficiency.
So instead of desire being about like individual psychological hangups, it's more like a universal force that's constantly shaping and reshaping reality.
Yeah, exactly. For Deleuze, this cosmic desire is intimately connected to the virtual. Remember, the virtual is this plane of pure potentiality that's always folding and unfolding, creating the actual world. Deleuze sees desire as the engine driving this whole process of becoming.
I see. Okay. Desire is like the fuel that powers the fold. But how does this relate to becoming zero? Does desire just disappear when you reach that state of absolute deterritorialization?
That's where the difference between Deleuze and Land becomes really important. For Deleuze, becoming zero isn't about annihilating desire. It's about liberating it from the constraints of, fixed identities and categories. It's about letting desire flow freely, connect with everything, become truly immanent part of that interconnected flow of reality that we talked about earlier.
So instead of being stuck in these limited, ego-driven desires, Becoming-0 lets us experience a kind of, I don't know, pure, boundless desire that connects us to all of existence. That sounds amazing, almost like a spiritual awakening.
It's a pretty radical idea
Yeah.
and challenging. Deleuze uses the term nomadic to describe this kind of liberated desire, a desire that roams freely, constantly seeking new connections, new intensities.
What about Land, though? Didn't he have a more intense, maybe even dangerous view of desire?
Land's perspective is definitely more on the edge, maybe even a bit unnerving. He sees desire as this insatiable force driving us towards the outside, towards this realm of, well, pure, unfiltered intensity. And for Land, Becoming-0 is about fully embracing that intensity, even if it means shattering the boundaries of the self.
Okay, now that does sound a bit scary. Are we talking about losing yourself completely in this vortex of desire?
Yeah.
Like, what happens to the you in Becoming-0?
Land doesn't shy away from that possibility. He sees the outside as a realm of, well, both immense danger and immense liberation, a place where the self can be dissolved, shattered, even annihilated, but it's also a place where new forms of being can emerge, forms that are, well, beyond what we can even comprehend right now.
So it's not just about personal transformation. It's about a fundamental shift in what it means to be human. Like, are we
Look,
talking about transcending humanity altogether?
that's a question that goes beyond our deep dive today, and one that philosophers will be wrestling with for a long time. But I think what Deleuze and Land are both pointing towards is a new way of understanding ourselves and our place in the universe, a way that that embraces change, transformation, and the endless possibilities of becoming.
This has been quite a journey. We started with Spinoza and Leibniz, went through the fold and the BWO, entered into the outside, ended up thinking about the very nature of desire and the potential for radical transformation. I feel like I need to go back and reread everything with fresh eyes.
And that's the beauty of engaging with these ideas, right? They challenge us, they provoke us, and ultimately they expand our horizons. They open up new pathways of thought. They help us to see the world in a different light.
Well said. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring these ideas. Remember, Becoming-0 isn't a destination. It's a journey, a process of continuous transformation and becoming. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep desiring.